We are pleased to have with us veteran Hollywood industry figure and Rancho Mirage resident James B. Harris, who has had an indelible impact on American cinema, serving triple duty as a producer, director, and screenwriter. He partnered with legendary director Stanley Kubrick to produce several provocative classics, including The Killing, which was the first screening we did, Passive Glory, which we just screened last week, and Lolita, before moving on to produce and direct The Bedford Incident, which we will see today, with a number of other feature films working with the likes of Sidney Poitier, Richard Pryor, James Woods, Wesley Snipes, and Dennis Hopper. To introduce today's film and guide us through the rest of this afternoon's program is Rancho Mirage's own Stephen C. Smith. Stephen is not only one of our favorite presenters here at the library, he is also an award-winning producer, filmmaker, author, and historian. Following the film, Stephen will moderate a discussion and Q&A with Mr. Harris, who we affectionately call Jimmy. Please join us in welcoming Stephen C. Smith, James B. Harris. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Christine, and thank you, Abe, for making this possible. And Jimmy, thank you for making this possible. And I'm so happy to see a good turnout today. I'm guessing that this is a film that many of you probably have not seen. Just a show of hands, out of curiosity, how many people have not seen The Bedford Incident before? Good, good, good. Excellent. I'm going to keep these remarks very brief because today's film is a little longer than the ones we saw. Not a long film. It's only an hour and 40-odd minutes, but Jimmy and Kubrick made 85-minute movies for their first two, so this one will seem this one is a tiny bit longer. Well, just a reminder that last week we saw how that pair of filmmakers had reached new heights of artistry with their second collaboration, the drama Paths of Glory, which was released in 1957. And that film did not find the box office success that it deserved, but the film's star, Kirk Douglas, was so pleased with the result that he asked Stanley Kubrick to direct his next movie, one that Kirk was also producing on a far more epic scale. That would be Spartacus, released in 1960. And although Stanley Kubrick had a pretty miserable experience taking orders from Kirk, as you might guess from one of the photos that you see here, Spartacus was a financial smash. It won 4 Academy Awards, and it made Stanley Kubrick one of Hollywood's hottest directors. Well, while Spartacus was being made, James B. Harris was no slouch. He was busy setting up the next film that he would produce with his friend Stanley, and that was Lolita, starring James Mason, Peter Sellers, Sue Lyon, Shelley Winters. It also was an Oscar-nominated success, and it did very well financially for Jimmy and for Kubrick. So now, James B. Harris had reached a new plateau in Hollywood. He was a major player, and he had to decide what he wanted to do next. The easiest, most logical perhaps thing to do would be to stick with his friend, Stanley Kubrick, and continue to produce Stanley's films. But Jimmy dared to take a different path. He decided to direct a movie himself. After 6 years working with Kubrick, Jimmy felt that he had learned a lot about the craft of directing, and he wanted to see if he could pull it off. Once again, he started by finding the right property to adapt. That would be The Bedford Incident, which was a novel by Mark Raskovich. It is a tense thriller about 2 nuclear superpowers, yes, the US and Russia, on a tense collision course. And Harris assembled a stellar cast. Sidney Poitier, who had just won a Best Actor Oscar, Richard Widmark, Martin Balsam, and Donald Sutherland in one of his first film roles. The movie combined location work on an actual naval destroyer with model work and various other special effects that presented Jimmy with new filmmaking challenges. And the result, I think you will agree, is a tense and at times even startling drama. Well, after The Bedford Incident, James B. Harris went on to direct several more films, working with such stars and stars-to-be, as Christine mentioned, as Dennis Hopper, James Woods, Viggo Mortensen, all of whom we see here. After today's movie, we will talk with Jimmy about the film you're going to see and what he learned from 25 years of directing and more of producing as well. But for now, let's watch the movie that launched James B. Harris on a new career path as a director. From 1965, here is The Bedford Incident. Thank you very much. So, Jimmy,
Yeah.
for the third week in a row, we have to start with the ending. This was quite an ending. I don't think most of the people in the room, certainly I did not see this ending coming when I first saw this film. You wanted a shocking ending. What was the reaction to Columbia, which of course had read the script, but when you made this film and showed it to the powers that be, tell me what the responses were.
Well, studios and most distributors want happy endings because that's more commercial. People leave the theater being uplifted, and these kind of endings do not appeal to anyone who's interested in having a commercial film. However, when you make a film that has a point to it, you have to make your point with the ending. And when I decided to do this film, it was important to me to try to show the audience, if there ever was going to be one, that no one can win a nuclear confrontation. That's what the MAD theory is, mutual assured destruction. Columbia, when they saw the ending of the picture, thought that they were in for a disaster in terms of leaving audiences wishing they hadn't seen the movie.
It seemed okay on the page, evidently, to them, but when they saw it, they were a little concerned.
I think they don't read the scripts carefully. They responded to the fact that I had Sidney Poitier and Richard Widmark and a very good cast that excited them. Plus the fact that Widmark and Poitier had been in films together and had one at Columbia called the Long Ships, which was very successful.
Yes.
So they felt that combination would guarantee success until they saw the picture.
I should say, by the way, you did such a good job because I would never have believed, as I know, having interviewed them both, that they were good friends for 15 years before making this movie. I thought their performances were excellent. But do carry on. So was this a battle with Columbia, or did you have it contractually that you could keep the ending?
Well, they are reasonable people to some extent. We had a discussion about it, and I tried to convince them that the picture would not make sense, or at least something we didn't want to advocate, that you can get away with a nuclear confrontation, you can win. No world war has started since 1945 because of the atomic bomb. And the understanding that everyone has is that nobody can win. So Columbia said, well, why don't we get a focus group together? We'll screen the picture for a full audience and then have a focus group afterwards. You can attend, but we can't let the audience know who you are, or else they'll feel embarrassed. And we'll ask and get an opinion about the ending. Well, fortunately, you just saw the picture. The ending stuck. The audience realized that it only makes sense if it's this kind of an ending. And Columbia, at that point, gave in and distributed the film. They were probably right about the fact that it wasn't going to be commercial, because I think we have more audiences here tonight.
And Poitier and Widmark, of course, were completely behind you on this as well, right?
Oh, sure. Oh, absolutely. I never saw them again. But, no, I had a close friendship with Sidney. Strangely enough, I had a close relationship with Dick Widmark when we were making the movie. But like when you make movies, everybody gets together. It's sort of misery loves company, And and then when it ends and you have your wrap party, everybody disappears. They go on to other films. You never see them again.
Yeah.
But I did continue a relationship with Sidney. But Woodmark, I ran into him once, maybe, in all those years.
Yeah, interesting. Well, tell me, going back to this being the first film that you made as a director, you had been working with Stanley Kubrick for a number of years, 6 years closely, and when you finally had that chance to sit in the director's chair, confident that you could, or at least believing you could do this, as you certainly did, what did you find comfortable to do? Like, oh, I know how to do this. And what surprised you in its difficulty?
You know, when I was just watching this movie, I hadn't seen it for a while, I was wondering why Stanley didn't sue me for plagiarism.
Because
everything that I learned by being so close to Stanley during the making of our 3 or 4 films, that a lot of his setups and camera movements I saw on the screen today. You know, it just reminded me of I thought that Stanley had done this movie.
But I have to say, it has a quality of its own that's different from the movies that we've seen for the last 2 weeks. And you were working with a superb cinematographer named Gil Taylor, who shot, among other things, the Beatles film A Hard Day's Night, which has this fabulous, almost documentary looseness to it. And he would go on to shoot a little movie called, I think it's called Star Wars. and the year before, well, just before Bedford, he shot a film for Mr. Kubrick that has some similarities thematically with this that you may have seen, called Dr. Strangelove. So tell me, you and Stanley were sort of thinking along similar lines, and tell me about your early involvement with Dr. Strangelove. You have a very funny story about that, actually, Jimmy.
I do?
I think you do, involving, well, let me put it this way. I'll say, you made sure you had a very amicable business separation with Stanley when you decided to work as a director on your own. This was something that you did as friends. You shook hands. You gave him the script for the Bedford Incident for his notes, and you helped set up the making of what was then called Red Alert, and was going to be for Kubrick a dramatic film like we saw today about nuclear war. And then you got a call from Stanley telling you that he'd met this guy named Terry Southern and the movie was changing a little. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know the story.
Well, they don't.
Actually, Stanley and I, after we did Lolita, we acquired the film rights to a book called Red Alert, which was a very serious story about the fail-safe situation. In fact, there was a book following it that Burdick had written called Fail Safe. Anyway, we decided to acquire Red Alert and develop that screenplay, and it was a very serious drama. And we developed the script. I put a deal together to have it financed, and once I did that, I felt that the need to direct my own movies. You know, Stanley was such a great influence, and with his blessings, I mean, we were very close friends. We were not just business partners. We were buddies, you know. We hung out together. You know, Stanley is 8 days older than me. We were born in the same hospital in New York. And it was sort of, we were destined to get together 26 years later. But Stanley gave me his blessings, and he understood that the real fulfillment is in directing. Because when you look up on the screen, you know you put that up there. You know, as a producer, you made it possible that it got up there, but the director got it there, you know, put it up there, and he understood. And so we kept in touch forever until he passed away. Right. When I just acquired the rights to the book that became that is the Bedford Incident, and developed the script, I naturally would send the script to Stanley to see what he thought. And he warned me that the ending, you know, where Widmark says, "If you'll fire one, I'll fire one," and he fires one. And, you know,
yes.
He said that that might get a laugh, you know, which
tells you something about Stanley Kubrick's sense of humor. I can't imagine the context of that getting a laugh, but okay.
So anyway, when we got the idea to cast Sidney Poitier in a part, I called Stanley, and because Sidney had said he'd love to read the script, I didn't want to waste a minute. So I called Stanley and said, hey, you have the script, which I sent you. Do me a favor and run it over to Sidney. So I think now, gee, Kubrick's become such an icon. I had my buddy run the script over to
Basically, he was an errand guy for you for a day. Meanwhile, he was making some changes to Red Alert, and tell me about that.
Yeah, well, once I left, and I had to talk. Seven Arts was the company that was going to make our serious version, which we called Edge of Doom, I believe. And several weeks had passed, and I had trouble selling them on it because Strangelove is, makes fun of the it's really.
Well, at this point, it's the serious Edge of Doom for adaptation of Red Alert.
Yeah, that's true. That's true at that point, but they didn't like the idea of the city swapping in the end, and it's the same problem that I have with this.
Yeah, but
they don't like.
Unhappy endings.
Yeah.
But tell me how Terry Southern changed things on that.
I left to open offices in Beverly Hills, and Stanley keeps me abreast of what's going on. And one phone call, he told me he had run into this writer named Terry Southern, who writes comedies, writes books like The Magic Christian and Flesh and Fantasy, things like that. And he said, we've decided that the story is better told as a comedy. And I said, Jesus, I leave him alone for 10 minutes and he's going to go right down the toilet. It turns out that's my favorite Kubrick movie.
Dr. Strangelove.
Yeah, Dr. Strangelove. I mean, the idea of turning it into a comedy was brilliant. And of course, we had worked with Peter Sellers in Lolita, so we had that relationship. So Stanley was able to get Peter into the picture. I think, Stanley made a classic film. It's my favorite Kubrick movie. Yeah. In fact, it's one of my favorite movies, period.
Yeah, it's a great film. Well, going back to the Bedford incidents, tell me, when you finally had the chance to direct, what did you enjoy the most about that? And can you give me a specific example?
Lunch, actually. And when you wrap, that's the most enjoyable part, is when the day is over. It's a nightmare making a movie. I mean, you could see all the shots, all of the setups, this picture was a combination of stock footage, studio, everything was done in the studio. Then we have a big outdoor tank in Malta that we working with a 33-foot model of the Bedford. It was just a technological nightmare to put this whole thing together. And it was a great learning experience, because movies really is a collaborative effort. Anyone thinks that one person, the auteur theory, that one person does everything. You can't make a movie without a lot of help from different people. And particularly the guy that wrote the book or the woman that wrote the book. Nobody ever gives them credit. I mean, they made up the story. They made up the characters. They did all the research on. I was in the Army, not the Navy. I didn't know the first thing about it, but you just learn from the book. When you do your adaptations, you have inherited all of that information, which is all the heavy lifting, actually. So I forgot what we were talking about.
I was asking what you enjoyed most about directing, and did you enjoy directing the actors? Who was easiest to direct? Who didn't need direction? Who needed some direction?
Well, you're working with two different types. Richard Widmark was an old pro. He liked to do things in the script without messing with it. Let's not try different things. Sidney was just the opposite. He loved the idea of playing around. Maybe we come up with something better. So when you're directing, you call the shots, so you try to get a compromise between the two. So when you're working with Widmark, when Sidney's not in the scene, you do not play with improvisations or any variations of what's in the script. When you're working with Sidney, You try things, you've already got the script that that works, but maybe we can improve it, and Sidney would try things, which most times I didn't like, actually. Actors, sometimes want to make more out of it than what it really is.
But you gave him space to feel like he could do things,
right.
Try things.
You have to be polite. Say, that's very good, Sidney, but I think, we'll have to pass on that.
I have heard you say, though, I think it's important to be open to different people's ideas on the set.
Well, Kubrick, who I learned a lot from, always believed that movies really was dependent upon 80% casting. And casting is so important. I mean, unless you want to make documentaries or animated films, you can't make these movies without actors, and actors, when you get the right ones, it's everything. I mean, they just make it happen. If you just have a bit of taste, you can work in dynamics. Take it down a little or up a little, but the actor really has to be hopefully intelligent, that understands what the scene is about. He also has to learn his lines, because if the actor comes into work when you're shooting and he doesn't know his lines, you can't tell whether the scene plays or not. So casting is absolutely the most important thing in making a movie.
I love the variety of actors you had. Let's say the subtle differences between Poitier and Woodmark, but then Martin Balsam as the doctor, Eric Portman, that wonderful actor who played the German officer, and then Wally Cox. And if any of you recall, he was the star of a sitcom, Mr. Peepers. He was the voice of Underdog, and I love the contrast of his kind of fluty voice. When it would come in, we'd know exactly who it was when we would hear him coming over talking about the sonar. Yeah. How was he cast? Can you give me just a few seconds about Wally Cox?
Sure, I'm a genius in casting. I didn't want him. I wanted Alan Arkin for that part. Alan Arkin had just made some noise on Broadway. But Woodmark, said, no, you want Wally Peepers, you want Mr. Peepers, you want, a real character, who's more interested in catching fish with his sonar and things. And he was right, That's why you have to have an open mind, As a director, you have the right to say no. You approve or disapprove, but your ears should be open. I mean, if a guy up on the arc light up in the roof yells down a suggestion, I mean, it might be better than what you had in mind. You should be, listen, you're going to get the credit for it anyway.
And unlike Richard Widmark's character, you listen to people, and that just shows a very key difference, I think, of results. Well, I want to ask a broader question. You went on to direct many films. You have films in development today. What advice would you give to those out there who are trying to put together a production as a producer or as a director? What's most important, do you think, what's the key skill set to have?
Money. That's what it's all about. It's a shame, but it, pictures cost millions to make, and it's hard to raise that kind of money. And the people who put up the money, they don't put it up in order to further film as an art form. They put it up to make money. So they have to be convinced that what you're offering is commercial. Well, that puts me out of the business almost, because I just don't think that way, nor does Stanley.
Well,
I mean,
but will their movies be shown decades later to a live audience?
Well, you don't know that at the time. But
that's, I think, good taste will out.
The thing is that people like to hear the melody loud and clear. That's I make I guess a metaphor with jazz music.
Jimmy's a jazz drummer, by the way.
Jazz is a very unpopular form of music because it deals with variations on a theme. And people get lost. They can't appreciate the variations because they're supported by the same chord structures, whether you're doing variations or playing the melody. And so movies are very much, to Stanley and myself, are very much the same, is that melody, would appeal to the mass audience, but the minute you start they lose it. They can't hear the melody anymore, and they get hostile. Or they get nervous, or walk out. But I think it's more interesting when you choose what scenes to dramatize, that you don't, you make the audience think a little bit. You have the actors, they should be able to say things that make the same point, but not on the nose.
Right. 2 + 2 = 5 sometimes.
And of course, as I said before, jazz is a very unpopular kind of music because people get lost once they don't hear the melody anymore, and you can't dance to it, And so, the whole world keeps rhythm on the beat. I get a little technical here, but if you're dealing in 4/4 time, and people like to keep time to the music on 1 and 3. So like if you're doing da 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 da, you're on the beat here. But if you want to swing, if you want it to be like the kind of movies you want to make, you want it off the beat. Da 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 da. This is on 2 and 4. Goodbye.
See, you didn't know you'd get a music class as well as some insights into cinema here. Well, Jimmy, we could talk for hours, but I want to make sure, this being our last for now of 3 visits here today, that we have a chance to ask people out in the audience some questions. So I see a raised hand. Yes, right there. Suggesting a similarity between Aaron Sorkin's play A Few Good Men and Richard Widmark's character. Yeah.
It shows you the dedication that an actor has, because Dick Widmark was one of the biggest liberals that I've ever met. And we decided that it didn't show up in the movie, but we decided to put a picture of Barry Goldwater in the captain's bedroom. Because Dick is going to be playing an extreme right-winger in the movie. It just like Adolphe Menjou played an extreme, who was an extreme.
But in that case, it was typecasting, which was so perfect, because Menjou was really known as, I won't say that character, but someone who was very, very conservative, very supportive of HUAC during the...
But Père de Glory is a real message in
Right.
anti-war.
Right.
Menjou in real life would want to wave a flag, and make war glamorous, or heroes, and yet being a dedicated actor, just like Widmark is, politics.
He knew a good part when he saw it.
Yeah, politics.
Adolphe Menjou.
Yeah, politics be damned. Let's get on with doing a good part.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, my brother. I'm going to play favorites here. That is my brother, currently appearing in the Fantastics at CV Rep.
I thought the choice of when to have music and when to have sound effects was really, really well done, and really contributed to the tension. Was a lot of time spent discussing that?
I'll repeat that for the recording. Yes, Wayne was saying that he really appreciated the use of music, and when there wasn't music and sound effects, like, of course, the sonar is used really musically. And Jimmy, was there a lot of discussion of that? How involved were you in that?
Yeah, of course. But it gets back to what I said earlier, is that making movies is a collaborative effort. You have sound effects specialists. You have a composer who's a specialist. And they all, you reserve the right to negate or to accept whatever their suggestions are. So hopefully the director will have good taste and will know the difference between something that works and doesn't work. But a lot of attention was paid, because this is a combination of special effects. Just shooting the models in a huge outdoor tank in Malta, which faces the ocean. And it's like the size of a football field, and there's a spill line where the water goes, and then you have a horizon in the real ocean, and you have to be careful that you don't have a double horizon, which, if you look carefully in some of the shots, you have a double horizon, and you're dealing with a model that you're trying to imitate a real destroyer. And when we got to Malta to shoot, the water didn't look like an ocean, and the ship looked like a toy. That means you have to find out how you can photograph it. So you have to put these machines at all of the edges of the tank to make waves, and then you have to put the camera about 9 inches over the water in order to make the boat look real. So it was a real problem to try to get the water not to look like a lake, because it was supposed to be in an ocean that has swells and things, and the boat has to look real. And we noticed, or our technical advisor noticed, that there's no bow wave in the model, because if you look at a real destroyer plunging through the water, there's a bow wave that is created. So we had to put air pumps on the sides of the ship, of our model, in order to manufacture a buoy. So to answer your question, which I forgot what it was, you do have to take special attention to all these things.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Jimmy. All right. Any more? I saw more hands out there. Yes, sir.
This might be a sensitive question, but what kind of distribution success did it have?
Hello?
What kind of distribution success did it have? For the record,
Well,
question.
it opened in New York to did some nice business in New York, but in the days that it opened in Los Angeles, we had multiple drive-in theaters. We don't see much of that or any of it today, but they played. It went wide, what they call opening multiple theaters. It went wide, and most of them were drive-ins. Well, it just so happened that the week it opened, it was like a complete week of rain, and so the picture didn't open well. I mean, didn't open. I mean, drive-in shut down when it rains. So you can imagine, and so much of the booking of films based upon its initial. The initial week that it opens, and then this had a very poor response, and so it didn't get much. It died. Let's face it.
But you live to fight another day and another day and another day.
It got great
films.
reviews, folks.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, sir, in the back.
Just an observation. I was in the Navy about the same time as this film, and I was on destroyers, and about a third of our crew was black. And in this movie, the only one was Sidney. He wasn't
No.
even a member of the crew.
Are you sure?
Yeah, there were some other black actors in it.
In those days, for what my technical advisor advised me, was that the Asians and the blacks were only used for the kitchen, and it wasn't integrated until a little bit later. The period of this is about when the Cuban Missile Crisis took place. It was in the 60s. So I'm not an expert on the Navy business. We made the mistake of putting Marty Balsam in a blue cap, which had gone out. We didn't know that, and our technical advisor when we were shooting the film. So we had to add that line.
Well, I was going to say, it's a great moment because it's one more thing for Widmark to attack him about. Yeah, it worked out. Happy accidents. Yes, any other questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah. How aware were you of the whole company? There's a superstar for all seasons that came out of that film, Donald Sutherland. Did you have any idea to say this guy has something?
Donald Sutherland, did you get a sense?
He had such a small part, I had no idea that he was going to become a star. But what a great cast, with MacArthur, Jimmy MacArthur, and Marty is so good. Yeah. And Eric Portman was a fine British actor. I mean, very big on the stage.
Who played the German officer, Eric Portman? Yes.
Yeah, and
Wonderful
Wally Cox,
actor.
of course, but so we used Gary Cockrell. He had a small part in this. We used him in Lolita. He was the one that winds up marrying Lolita in the end. when you do a picture in England, which I did because it was cheaper, and it qualified for the ED plan, which is a subsidy that is created for if you make pictures with United Kingdom people. And since Sidney had a dual passport, he was actually born in Jamaica, so he qualified under the UK. And you're allowed certain exemptions. So that meant we had to cast the picture as everybody's playing Americans. So you have to find Canadians, and because you can't use British people. It's a dead giveaway. As soon as they start to open their mouth, you can tell it.
Back then it was. Now I'm constantly fooled. It's like, Damian Lewis is British? A Band of Brothers? I can't believe this.
That's what the stars. I mean, they learn to have the American accent. They come from Australia. You can't tell, like Mel Gibson and people like that, or Hugh Jackman. But you're casting a lot of people with one line here or one line there.
Sutherland was Canadian.
Yeah, and you can't have them come out like.
Right. Yeah. Any other questions? We're going to wrap up soon, so last chance, although I suspect we'll see Jimmy again. While you think, I'm going to put in a shameless plug and say that I hope you come back on Monday, December 4th, because I'm starting what I think of as season 2 of Hollywood Game Changers, showing 3 classic movies that move the needle in the movie business and are all immensely entertaining, starting with the great Warner Brothers film, The Maltese Falcon, and lots of information you have probably not heard about it. So I hope you'll come back for that. And last chance for questions. Well, then I'll just say thank you, James B. Harris, for all that you've done here.
You're welcome.
And thank all of you, and thank you, Rancho Mirage Library, for hosting us. Thank you, Christine and Abe. Have a great day.